Welcome to Hope is Here. My name is Greg Horn, and we've gone international one other time in our topics on Hope is Here. We talked with a lady that started a ministry in India, helping provide an elementary school, faith-based school system in the slums of India. It was just a powerful story. We did that back in February, I believe. So if you missed that, you ought to go back to our website, hopeishere.today, and check that out. I know you'd be really, really blessed. And so we're going to go international and see what God's doing way on the other side of the world in our program today. In fact, we're going to go to New Zealand. We're going to we're talking with Nate Hutchison. He and his wife Whitney stepped out in faith in 2007, took a big risk and moved to New Zealand from the comforts of the United States to help start new churches, and actually have had 3 kids that were born in New Zealand. So, Nate, first of all, man, thanks for joining us here today on Hope is Here.
Hey, no worries, Greg. I'm glad to be here and glad to have the opportunity to share what God's doing in New Zealand.
Well, the great thing is we know God is working all over the world, and when Jesus died and rose from the dead, that he told us to go into all the nations and spread the gospel, and you all definitely do that. But tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in ministry, and just kind of let people know about your United States background.
Yeah, sure, man. So I was born here in the States, obviously, and grew up as a pastor's kid, and I kind of had this thought in my head that, like, when I finally went into the ministry, I didn't have any thought that I'd go overseas or do anything missions work-wise, but my wife had a degree in missions, and so we just kind of had that in the back of our heads. Well, maybe if she gets called, then we'll go. Well, I'm a worship pastor, so I was doing music at a church in Indianapolis, and everything was going really well. I loved my job, loved the church, but it just kind of started to feel like what I was doing, I could do on my own strength. And so I didn't like that feeling because I was getting pats on the back a lot, and I was, how pride can creep in, and I probably was getting a bit puffed up by that. So I just started to pray, God, put me in a place or in a position where I need you more than I have the strength to do it myself. So that was months of just praying that and just wondering, God, what is it that you want me to do? How can I just be more of a gospel minister where I am? But what God does sometimes is, I think in order to shape and mold our hearts to look more like Christ, He's a sending God. So He sent us out. And the weirdest thing happened was, one day I was just checking my emails in the office at church, and this guy just emailed like one sentence. It said something like, "Would you be interested in planting a church in Christchurch, New Zealand?" And I was like, "What in the world?" I didn't even know where New Zealand was. And so I sent that on to my wife, kind of as a joke. And I was like, "Whitney, what do you think? Let's move to New Zealand, haha." And she replies with, "Hey, let's actually pray about this." Oh yeah, we should pray. We definitely should pray about it. And
because you're such a great spiritual leader of your home, right?
clearly, Greg. So, but she was right, man, and she helped me to see that opportunity sometime. And so we prayed about it, and over the course of about a year, we'd taken a trip over to New Zealand to check it out with the team that wanted to plant the church. We had really good chemistry with those guys, and we started to see, man, we could really fit well within this culture. Just our personalities fit well with Kiwi culture, and we prayed and talked to a lot of people, and it just felt like confirmation after confirmation, and just God was pushing us to go. And yeah, it was a step of faith, but man, what an exciting opportunity to go to such a beautiful country and do something so exciting. When we were 27, we didn't have kids. We thought, hey, this is the time to do something like this if we're ever going to do it. So we stepped out. And guess what? A month before we were leaving, we had all our things packed up. We found out Whitney's pregnant with our first kid,
Wow.
which was not on purpose. And that kind of was a bit of a shock. and we thought, oh no, is this going to change what we can do? But Greg, it was like the best thing that could have happened. It was such a good opportunity to start a family there, and to meet other people with young kids, and that really helped us get going in our first year with meeting people.
Well, you talk about a major life change. You know, you grew up St. Louis, Cincinnati areas, and then you go on the other side of the world, New Zealand, and step out in faith. On top of that, you're going to be a dad for the first time, and so some real exciting stuff. But talking about getting out of your comfort zone, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, Nate, is that I think a lot of times, you know, we kind of play it safe here in the United States, and it really, I thought was phenomenal that you said, you know, you were doing really well in your ministry in Indianapolis as a worship leader, yet you were starting to realize maybe you were doing it more in your strength and depending on God. And it's kind of easy to get into that, isn't it? Sometimes if God's given us a gift, that sometimes we start maybe taking a little bit more of the credit and not including God as much in what we're doing with the gifts that He's given us.
Absolutely, man. It's the Bible says that He lifts up the humble, and He will make the prideful fall. And I never want to be in a position where I'm taking credit for something that God's doing. Even if I'm a part of it, He's just using me. It's just, the way I look at it is, I'm blessed to get to play a small role in God's story. And you know that book that Louis Giglio wrote, I Am Not, But I Know I Am? That one was a real formative book for me, because Louis Giglio talks about this big story of God, and I was reading it right around the time of that decision, and he says, man, just don't think too highly of yourself in your life story. You've got to sacrifice that, give that up, throw down that sort of crown that we all like to put on our heads when God's doing things with us, and say, whatever it is, wherever it is, God, just use me. Let me play a small role in your big story. God is the central character. I am not. I'm just His servant. And so that helped. That thought helped me, because, like, to be honest, I wasn't great at thinking that way. I think that as a young pastor and as a young music guy, especially when things go well, that can go to your head, and that can be something that the devil uses to kind of take credit and glory away from God and put it on you, and that's just not fulfilling at all when you think that way. So I found, in my experience, just really saying to God, "Hey, I don't need to be anything important. I don't need to have these pats on the. I think I like it, but I don't want it. And God, whatever you want me to do, send me. I'll go." And He put me in a place where, in New Zealand, they're honestly, they don't compliment people on much at all. They're very much a culture that doesn't like it when someone stands up above the rest, and so it's called tall poppy syndrome. So, like, what a poppy is, like a flower, where they grow in nature. Sometimes when a tall one sticks up, like, they'll just chop it off. So they talk about people that way in New Zealand. If someone just pops up above the rest and thinks more highly of themselves, well, as a culture, we're going to tear them down and make sure that they kind of fit in with the rest. And I kind of love that about the culture, because you can't be all about yourself. You got to be about the rest of the group. And so it was an adjustment living there, but God's totally using it to shape me and to mold me.
Just tuned in, we're talking with Nate Hutchison. He and his wife, Whitney, in 2007 took a big risk and moved to New Zealand, here from the comforts of the United States, to help start new churches. They are raising kids, starting churches internationally. I love what you said on your all's website that you put together, to be able to obviously communicate with people across the world here, that it's a beautiful mess of a life, and we love it. all three of your kids were born in New Zealand. They're little Kiwis, and we definitely want to hear more about that. But I do have to ask you, I think it's great, obviously, that you did step out in faith and did that, but I do want to ask, what was your family's reaction? I mean, it's one thing when you talk about it and say, yeah, we're thinking about it, but then when you actually made that decision that, hey, we are going to move all the way across the world, and oh, by the way, we're pregnant, so we're going to have our first kid, their first grandchild, with away from them thousands of miles. What was both yours and Whitney's family's reactions?
Well, mixed, I'd say, because we grew up in both in Christian homes. Both of our dads are pastors, so they get that kind of like raise a child up in the way of the Lord. And sometimes they move across the world to to follow what God's asking them to do. So they were excited on that hand, and they were encouraging in that way. But there was also, man, you could tell like they were gonna miss us, and we were gonna miss them, and so that side of it definitely was probably more subtle, but definitely, I think we're very blessed to have the families that we do in that way. Various reactions among different people in the family, but yeah, pretty lucky to have that kind of support from family. We always tell people when we went to New Zealand like 10 years ago, we've gone through so much, and this was sort of the heart-shaping kind of stuff that God uses, trials and things to shape us. And he said, I tell people, in New Zealand we've been through all kinds of natural disasters like earthquakes and having children, and that's definitely been a stressor for us, is having 3 kids in a foreign country and not having the help of family around. That's been a challenge, and we've relied on our friends there quite a bit to help us when we need a date night or something. So.
Well, that definitely is. I know that obviously family is a huge help when you have little ones, especially when you have multiple little ones. So I know that they've been glad to have you all back in the States here for a little bit. And how often are you able to get back each year, or how often are you able to get back to the United States? You left in 2007, so like let's just say over the last 5 years, how often have you been able to come back to the States?
Well, it's so expensive. We can't do every year, so to travel for all of us could be like $8,000 to $9,000 over here. So it's just once every 3 years for us, and we try to make the most of that and try to come in the summertime here, so we're not, having a year-long winter. So that's cool. And then so we're here for about 3 months every 3 years, and we catch up with the people that support us as a family. And this time around, it's really exciting. We're planting a second church, so we're actually having to do some fundraising for that as well. So it's a bit more busy this time around.
All right, real quick, we got to wrap up here, but we're going to continue this conversation tomorrow in our program. But if somebody's listening, like, man, I'm really interested in that and like to find out more about what you're doing, what's the best way to go online and find out information about what you and Whitney are doing in church planting over New Zealand, Nate?
Yeah, go to churchplant.nz. That's the web address. It's real simple, churchplant.nz. And there are links off of that to our personal website as well. But that will give you the basic story of what's going on right now in New Zealand. And then if you click on the link under our picture, you can hear our story from 10 years ago.
All right, well, stay with us tomorrow. We'll talk more about what the actual church is like in New Zealand. I'm Greg Horn. We'll see you tomorrow on Hope is Here.
Kevin Bradley is the #1 RE/MAX real estate agent in the state of Kentucky, and he lives right here in Scott County. Having sold over 200 homes in 2017, Kevin would welcome the opportunity to help you buy or sell your home or answer any real estate questions that you have. Kevin is a proud supporter of Georgetown College men's and women's basketball. Contact Kevin Bradley today at 859-619-9896. That's 859-619-9896 with RE/MAX Creative Realty.